This chat this evening with the Federal Monitor, Bart Schwartz. My name is Asha Muldrow. I'll be hosting for this evening. Welcome to the Staten Island Community. Welcome to the Staten Island Community Meeting. What we will do this evening is hear from the Federal Monitor. We'll hear some updates and some explanations for some of the questions you might have. And then we will hear from some of our invited guests who are residents. And then we will turn the floor over to all of you. First, starting with Staten Island residents specifically. And we ask that you identify yourself and your development in your borough, please. And then we will open the mic up to residents from all of other boroughs. But Staten Island residents are our VIPs for this evening. We are joined by several members of the Monitor team's executive leadership that represent various pillars that we're focused on pursuant to the agreement. So we have representatives from our mold and lead team, elevators and heat, waste and pest, and compliance. We also have Eva Trimble, who is from NYCHA in the Office of the Chair, who has joined us. And we have other team members as well. Bart Schwartz doesn't do this alone. He has an experienced group of professionals that support this effort. So they've all joined the call to answer any of your questions and to hear your concerns as we talk this evening. So we have a manageable sized group, so we're hoping to hear from everyone that wants to speak. You can start lining up in the chat and just indicate in the chat feature that you would like to speak, your name, your development, and your borough. And Floretta Hudson, who is one of our organizers for this evening, will move you over in line. So now I would also, as a matter of housekeeping, ask that you please keep yourself muted until you're called upon. When you are called upon, remember if you're on the phone to *6 to unmute yourself. And we're not using the raise your hand feature. If you'd like to be acknowledged, please indicate so in the chat feature. Okay, so with that, I will turn it over to Bart Schwartz.
Thank you, Asha. I appreciate that. And I know since the primary purpose of these meetings is for us to hear from the community and to be able to respond to questions during the meeting or follow up. And so we're following our usual course, which is to record the audio record the meetings. So we make sure we get the questions right and we get back to the people who asked the questions. Again, since our meeting, this meeting today and other community meetings primarily serve to respond to questions, we'll try to keep our presentations relatively brief. I do want to start by sending out our prayers to the people who were injured today at the Sotomayor buildings in Soundview, where there's a fire and 12 people were injured and 4 critically. And of course, we all hope that everyone is well, and our prayers are with them. There are a few different subjects I want to cover today. One is probably the most common question I get when I talk.
I'm sorry, Bart, I need to interrupt you for a moment. I was remiss in not mentioning one other key housekeeping item. We do have a Spanish language interpreter. So if you would like to be switched to the Spanish room, if you prefer to hear the presentation interpreted, please switch your icon. There's the language button. And if you indicate Spanish, we'll go there automatically. If you're having any trouble, indicate in the chat and we will try to help you with that. Thank you. Sorry about that part. Please proceed.
Not at all. So I'm pleased that, although not physically to be back in Staten Island, we have to do these things remotely, but I am pleased to be back for our second community meeting. And I thank all of you who have attended. As I was saying, there's one particular area which I need to discuss at every meeting I have, whether it's one-on-one remotely before the pandemic It's the most common question or series of questions, and it's confusion over the different plans and reports and proposals that are out there. So I'm going to try to do my best to explain it as I understand it. And I think I've got it right. I hope you will ask me if there's any confusion. I hope you will ask me during the question and answer period because I want to try to clear it up. So I suppose the starting point for explaining this is that the agreement that NYCHA signed with the city, with the Southern District of New York, and with HUD requires the creation of an organizational plan. For those who are interested, that's paragraph 45 on page 10 of the agreement. And the organizational plan section requires a couple of things. The first is that the monitor and the mayor's office together engage a third-party management consultant selected jointly by the city and the monitor to examine NYCHA's systems, policies, procedures, management, and personnel structures and make recommendations. That third-party consultant is KPMG, a large accounting firm. They were engaged by the city and the monitor together. They issued, I might add that NYCHA was offered the opportunity to participate in the selection process and developing the scope of KPMG, and not under the current management, but under prior management, declined to be a participant. So this was the primary responsibility of the mayor's office and the monitor's office. KPMG wrote what I think is an excellent report, particularly considering the time that they had to do it. It is quite lengthy. That's probably my biggest criticism of it because there's so much content in there, but it included sections called opportunities, which is another way of calling it recommendations. And that's relevant to talk about because it covered such a broad scope, had so much detail and so much information in it, and was intended to be a lead into the organizational plan, which the HUD agreement requires. Now, the organizational plan was never produced as such or with that title. NYCHA decided to call what they were working on the transformation plan. And that transformation plan, the expectation that was going to be the same content as the organizational plan. As it turned out, there are aspects of what should have been in the organizational plan, we thought, which didn't make it into the transformation plan. But the transformation plan itself was an extensive document, lots of effort put into it, experts engaged to help, and thought through by the top level people at NYCHA. So it was a valuable document, but it wasn't exactly what we expected. So we agreed with NYCHA that to turn the transformation plan into what we understood to be the organizational plan, we would then together write something called the implementation plan. The implementation plan is really filling in the details and the of the transformation plan. So transformation plan plus implementation plan should equal the organizational plan. But to be clear, neither HUD nor the Southern District nor the Monitor have approved any plan that has been proposed thus far. And the implementation plan, we hope, will, matched with the transformation plan, will produce a plan which we can all support. And that plan that that's produced could be very much like the transformation plan. It could have more, it could have less, it could take different approaches. There's nothing that is approved and agreed to at the moment, although there's a lot of common ground to be working. So the next thing that everybody hears about is the blueprint. Now, the blueprint, when the HUD plan was signed, there was no such thing as a blueprint. It was developed by NYCHA in the current administration, and it is essentially a proposal to HUD, to the legislature, to Congress, to, to create to create a way to generate financing for NYCHA projects. So you could have the organizational plan as part of the blueprint, or you could have the organizational plan without the blueprint. They're not tied together and were never thought of together because they came into existence over different times and really serve different purposes. It's not that they're mutually exclusive; it's that they're directed at different issues and are dealt with differently. So, to summarize, and I need to do this for myself every so often. To summarize, we've got the blueprint, which is the legislative proposal to the state legislature. It'll have to be to Congress. It'll be to HUD. That is that overall plan of how NYCHA hopes to generate funding for projects, up to $40 billion, as I recall. The transformation plan and the implementation plan will be what is the organizational plan in the HUD document, although by the time we get there, it'll probably all be called the transformation plan. So maybe the language will start to come together. I hope that helps, and everyone understands that we're still in the process of reviewing and approving plans. Nothing has been finalized, nor has it been rejected. It's still a process that's ongoing. So that is the first item, and I know for some people it may be repetitious, but because there are so many questions about it, I really did want to address it again. The next thing I wanted to talk about, when the HUD agreement is nearing a 2-year anniversary at the end of this month, and the appointment of the monitor will have its 2-year anniversary early March. Technically, I think it's March 1st, but say early March. So what we've been doing is taking a look back, and I just want to give you a subject matter preview for the most part of what the next report, the next quarterly report will look like. There are many accomplishments. I can't say that enough of them have reached the residents, that nobody is satisfied with that, but we believe we're making that progress. And when you list the accomplishments and read through them, I think you'll reach the same agreement and the same conclusion. And we will, in the next report, discuss some of those accomplishments. But whether it's fortunate or unfortunate, my job is really to look at the failures, not to look at the accomplishments, and to spend my time, my resources, and my budget on trying to fix the things that aren't working, not spend a lot of time talking about what may be working. So to do that, we've created 2 systems, and there may be some subsystems we'll add to it, but the 2 systems are a very simple memo of deadlines and whether deadlines that NYCHA agreed to have been met, haven't been met, and status. And that document, we will be meeting with NYCHA with, I spoke to Greg Rush this morning. I think we're going to be meeting sometime this week or next week to make sure that we've got it right and to hear what they have to say about it and to make corrections where we've got it wrong. The second document we're calling the tracker documents. They will have more information about individual work streams, as well as information about the action plans where many of the deadlines are, uh, and more explanation and more text about, rather than just a date and whether a deadline is met or not. We're going to do the same thing with the tracker. We're not going to print that or publish it until we meet with NYCHA. NYCHA has a chance to review it, and if revisions need to be made, to make those revisions. But I expect we'll be including both of those in the next quarterly report, which will go out this month. And we'll also, as we've done in the past, if something has been completed or accomplished during the month, say the month of January, even though the report is supposed to cover only through the end of December, we will update it with what happened in January to make sure that nobody gets the wrong impression about something that has already been completed or managed, but wasn't as of the end of December, but was a few weeks later. So that will be part of the next report. Now there are some things that we know have not been done successfully. We will review some of those in the next report as well. One of the patterns that we see, and I hope people will look at that, excuse me, when the report is out, is that some of the failure patterns, in fact, many of them, have nothing to do with NYCHA's revenue or resources. It's just a matter of not getting the job done the right way. And I'll give you at least one example that has to do with heat, where there are standardized operating orders for what to do when there is a lack of heat in an apartment or an outage, such things as immediately checking the boilers, checking surrounding apartments, taking heat measurements, which I'll talk about in a moment. And clearly those standard orders are not being followed, and that the work orders being generated where they take a temperature, the temperature can range from 0 to 100 on the reports. Many times the temperature isn't reported at all. That has nothing to do with whether there's enough funding at NYCHA. That has to do with training and oversight and review by management. And there are other examples of that, and we'll set forth some of those in the next report. The comment I wanted to make about taking the temperature, one of the things we've been told by NYCHA time and time again is that buildings can hold a lot of heat for a fair number of hours. I don't know how accurate that is, but assuming it is accurate, you got to wonder why you're taking the temperature if you think the building is holding the heat, and instead looking for why a complaint came in as to why an apartment doesn't have heat or a line doesn't have heat. So these are things that we will be addressing, and we want to focus on those things which can be accomplished not just because not by throwing money at them, but by doing a better job of preparing for them. And that will be part of our next report. Now, before the meeting started, I learned that in the Baez litigation, and for those who are not familiar with it, the Baez litigation is over mold, was brought in the name of an individual, Maribel Baez, but is a class action. And under that, the settlement reached in Baez, there are certain requirements which NYCHA must meet with regard to managing the mold problem, responding to complaints of mold, having standard procedures and operations. Toward the end of last year, through investigators that who work for the monitor's office, we learned that at Washington Heights rehab, there were serious questions as to whether mold tickets were being handled properly for repair. And since Washington Heights was scheduled to be turned over in a packed turnover within days of when this was discovered and corroborated, we immediately notified NYCHA, we notified HUD, we notified the Southern District. One, because there was a financial transaction about to take place, and also because it was a health issue. And it's clear that standard procedures have not been followed there, and there are other problems with the way that had been handled. The good news is that when we reported it to NYCHA and to the compliance department, which is one of the 3 departments we helped set up, they responded promptly to the problem and to the issues, and we conducted a joint investigation with them, more of which I'm sure will come out, if not in our report and in other ways, may come out in the Baez litigation, which is going on now. Now, one of the what might be considered a side issue of the Baez litigation and is now the subject of legal filings, including one that was made yesterday, which I'll refer to briefly. But the question is, when a building with mold is turned over to a developer, does NYCHA have any continuing obligations with respect to the cleanup of that mold, or to see to it that the developer cleans up the mold? NYCHA has taken the position that it has no obligation, and that will be litigated. I don't know if that's their complete position, because I can't tell from the documents I have, and whether they say if they know about it for 5 years, there's still no obligation. If they know about it for 1 day, there's no obligation. And I imagine those things will be litigated. The next series of papers that will be filed on January 19th, which will be the Baez plaintiff's response to the papers that NYCHA filed yesterday or today, claiming that there's no continuing obligation. And then I believe January 27th is when Judge Pauly will hold a hearing, or perhaps an oral argument with the lawyers as to what their positions are. So that's something I've mentioned in other meetings for people to follow, and we were certainly following it very closely. The document that I've looked at, and I have not looked at all of them, is a declaration. It's not an affidavit necessarily, but it serves the same purpose, by Greg Russ, supporting NYCHA in not being responsible for a cleanup after something has been transferred. And it discusses primarily well, not primarily, but the central theme seems to be that since NYCHA can't fix the capital issues, it can't solve the problem. And I think it says it can't fix the root causes. These problems cannot be addressed without a massive infusion of capital. It really is not clear what they're saying about the remediation and abatement of mold, which there is known about and which exists, and which is not in a development that's going to be turned over. So I think we all need to be watching that. We'll be asking lots of questions about it through the monitorship to find out what the positions are that NYCHA is taking. Let's see. Another area that we've been asked about is the so-called GDA. That is the state's reimbursement for expenses. The state has offered $450 million in reimbursement and has set certain requirements which have been codified, and they're also the monitors has the same requirements and qualifications. We've been asked how much money has been reimbursed, and the answer is none, zero. The reason it's zero is because there hasn't been any request for a reimbursement, and I don't expect we'll get a request until NYCHA has to provide certain additional information, fundamental information about how the money is going to be spent. Once they do that, then they'll be in a position to start making requests, and the requests will then be reviewed, which is part of the monitorship. So so the money is still there, but nothing has been. There have been no requests for reimbursement, so there's been no reimbursement up to this point. I could go into more detail on some of these things, but I'm not going to at this time. I do want to say, after having done this for 2 years, and uh, and, um, and having to, as everybody else has, deal with the pandemic on top of everything else, uh, I still believe in the HUD agreement. I really think the foundation of it is to bring service and quality to the lives of the residents of NYCHA. That has not changed. The pandemic has not changed that. And where there are issues that don't depend upon getting more money, they depend upon doing the job the right way. Uh, I really challenge NYCHA to show that they can do that they can meet the commitments they've made, realizing that most of the commitments were made knowing the resources they had. So to say now that there may not be resources for for operations and other things, we have to look at that very carefully. But I really challenge NYCHA to show that they can meet the commitments they make, and it's almost a way to judge how well they'll do if the blueprint works and they get $40 billion to spend. We want to make sure that what they're spending now is done properly and efficiently and effectively and reaches the residents. So that really completes the things that I wanted to cover and to say. Asha, I don't know. I know I listened, but but I forgot now. Do you want me to take questions now or later? I think you've got an agenda.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank
I'll
you so
abide by
much.
your agenda.
Thank you so much, Bart, for that thorough update. We really appreciate it. And I want to emphasize that we will have a report issued next month. When we issue a report, we always post it on our website at nychamonitor.com. We also send a copy to all of the tenant association presidents. The email addresses we have are only as good as the addresses that NYCHA has. So if you haven't received them, please make sure that NYCHA has your best email address so that we can make sure we have your best contact information.
Just one clarification, Asha. We hope to get it out this month. It's through the period ending December 31st. So
Oh, great. Thank you.
We're working to get it out this month if we can.
Excellent. So the report will be coming out soon. We wanted to open the floor up for questions. One of the things that we do as the resident outreach team with the monitor is we have a couple of different types of events. One of the events are these community meetings where we host a meeting, usually in person, but in recent months we have to do them virtually. We go to each borough. So we were in Staten Island last year. You all are our first stop on the year 2 tour. So this is the first time we're coming back to a borough, and then we will be going to all of the subsequent boroughs every other month. And everyone is invited, even if you don't live in that borough, but we will give the mic over to residents in Staten Island first. One of the things that's been really nice about these meetings are just the opportunity to have a constructive dialogue. We want to hear your concerns, your issues, your thoughts, recognizing that unfortunately we can't do everything. We're not responsible for coming and actually fixing your units. So if you do have concerns that relate to your own particular unit, please follow the normal channels, calling the 77 number, putting in your tickets. Although we realize that sometimes that has its own set of frustration, but that really is still the best format. This evening isn't to express concerns about any of your individual issues, but we really do want to hear thoughts and concerns that you might have with regards to systemic issues, the large things that affect your development, the NYCHA as a whole, things that you think the monitor could do, should be doing, could do better. Those are the big things that we'd like to hear about this evening. And we remind you that this evening doesn't mean that this is your only time to talk to us. So we have an email, phone numbers, you can reach out at any time. I've had the privilege of meeting many of you through our visits or virtually or over the phone. I encourage more outreach. Again, recognizing that we don't typically focus on individual unit issues, but the systemic issues, the development-wide issues, please bring those to our attention as well. And so with that, I get the good fortune of speaking with a lot of residents in different boroughs, different developments, pretty much every day. And I'm always really appreciative of the thoughts and insights that are shared, because you live in NYCHA housing, you have your feet on the ground, and you are the eyes and ears. So we're really need your input. By way of background, I consider myself a NYCHA baby. I was born and raised in NYCHA in Harlem in the Lincoln. And then I went on to Yale and law school. I've been practicing for about 20 years, and I work at Guidepost Solutions. So when we got this assignment to work with NYCHA, for me, it was more than just a job. It's really personally important to get this right. This is home. And we keep that top of mind in our work. This is home for 400,000 plus tax-paying citizens of New York. So we have to get this right for you, but it's a hard and big job. So we need your help. So with that, I wanted to first turn the microphone over to Mr. Manuel Martinez, who had some really thoughtful, interesting, systemic questions and issues that he wanted to bring up. And I thought that would be a good way before we opened up the floor to get us started with our dialogue. Mr. Martinez, please proceed.
Good evening. Good evening, Bart. Thank you, Ms. Modro. I appreciate the introduction. I appreciate our conversations as well. Mr. Schwartz, we appreciate your presence here and the impact that you're having as the federal monitor in the oversight. There are some issues, and I also want to give a salutation to Ms. Handy. It's always a pleasure to see you. I've been working with her, had the honor to work with her for a while. And that's been great. Now, there are some issues, and you speaking to the Baez case, right? And so some of the issues that I have to present is in regards to the pillars that's on the agreement, right? We're looking at the mold, the lead, the pest, and the engagement in which NYCHA has with the residents, with the families who live in the apartments. Obviously, the priority is to improve the quality of life in that apartment, the conditions in that apartment, but it's also to engage the residents with the responsibilities that they have on a day-to-day basis, right? We have a working population in NYCHA of 44%, I believe, if not higher, of the working class population. 80% of, or a little over 80% of the NYCHA population is employed. When we are engaging in matters where NYCHA will provide an inappropriate notice to the families with regards to how they issue and communicate, they would slide a notice under a door, roll it up next to a doorknob, or put it under a door knocker, when what they are supposed to do by federal regulations is to actually have a communication with the head of the household, or someone 18 or over, or to issue a first-class mail, right? To send first-class mail. They do not do that. They will send untimely notices and then put us under the threat of having an apartment door drilled out if we're not there. Or they will close out a ticket and put it under as if it was a tenant not home, right? We have to also address that we're coming from you're coming into an organization that has a work culture that is questionable, especially when the investigations that were surrounding and provoked this particular agreement, identified a manual that they utilized on how to deceive HUD. And so we have to engage in that particular habitual, culturalized bad efforts or bad intentions. It seems that within the 2 years that that the monitor has been in place, that Mr. Schwartz has been here, that has been an oversight that was not completed. And what I believe should be done is that there should be a more customer focused engagement with the residents in which, their personal responsibilities are taken into account, right? With a reasonable time frame for them to make the proper accommodations, for them to have the visit and get the issues corrected, and that there is a full agenda for all of the issues that they're addressing, right? Because a home may have both mold, lead, and pest issues all at the same time. So instead of coming in to just address the mold and then have to redo the whole process again, where somebody will miss 3 days of work because of NYCHA's inability to organize us to create an agenda, we need to be better organized in that regard. Also, and I spoke about the deficient work culture that we have. There is an ability, right, within the agreement that the monitor has certain powers, especially under these pillars of improvement, to set the pace for NYCHA. I know that we're waiting for a transformational plan. Under the agreement, it was 60 days to select the contractor or the consultant that was going to engage in it, but we're 2 years in and we haven't had anything rolled out. And there are powers in the agreement that you can utilize to roll out, or rather set the pace for NYCHA. We shouldn't be chasing behind NYCHA. NYCHA should be falling in accordance to what needs to be done. And so that, I wanted to explore further, because I know that NYCHA has created, under the agreement, 3 different compliance departments, right? The compliance, quality assurance, and the environmental department. But how of that, I'm concerned that these departments don't become symbolic departments that says that we exist and we're taking, care of these issues, but they're not. Currently, we still have a blatant exploitation of Section 3. We have blatant exploitation of contractor, or the lack of contractor oversight on the projects that they're doing with. They're not providing sufficient quality in their work or in engagement. Me personally, I've been harassed in my own home by the lead inspectors. I've had addressed other issues of that nature with other residents that I represent here. So I ask you, how can we set the pace using the agreement so that NYCHA can be more coordinated and take into accountability the lifestyles, and the responsibilities of the residents, and respect our rights and privileges?
Thank you, Mr. Martinez, for that thoughtful presentation. Bart, would you care to comment now?
Yes, definitely. I think the first observation that I'd make is that I don't think a single one of the issues you raised would be solved simply by having more money. They'd be resolved by better management, better inspection, accountability, and things of that nature. So I think that's consistent with what we are saying. One point you said under the agreement that there was a requirement that within 60 days a outside consultant had to be hired. That's correct, but we did that. We did that within 60 days. That's the KPMG report. And that's one of the things we're using to measure against what NYCHA is doing or planning to do to improve its facilities. So that will be eventually the organizational plan. And HUD and the Southern District are participating in that process as well. With respect to engaging residents, I think you were being kind. The problems there impact residents' ability to hold down their jobs because they miss work to stay home and then no one shows up. There are no there aren't proper communications. I know NYCHA is very proud of the robo calling process, except also it seems that many of the numbers in robocall are out of date numbers because they rely on the resident to report a new phone number, and that doesn't happen as often as it should. So the it is NYCHA takes the position that resident engagement is not part of the agreement. I take the position that it is part of the agreement. And where's Edna? Edna Handy and I talked about it just the other day. What I'm looking at is I'm trying to compare what does NYCHA do when it wants to get something done, and compare that to what does it do when it may not be as interested in getting something done as it should be. So we're looking at now it's a difficult thing to do during the pandemic because everybody is being squeezed in terms of what kind of personal communications you can make. But we'll be looking and have looked in the past at, for example, what efforts did NYCHA make with residents when they wanted them to go rad or packed? And did they apply the same enthusiasm to explaining to residents what the blueprint is about, or what capital work may be done at a project, and what's going to be out of development and so forth. So I agree that is an ongoing issue that is very personal. I'll give you another example. Sometimes you just have to catch these things. When NYCHA has a lengthy repair, say on a heat outage, what they used to do is post some information saying that it would be out for 12 hours because that was the shift. But they knew it was going to take 18 hours to repair. But they only were thinking in terms of shifts. We asked them, and I hope they're doing it. I haven't checked recently, but their plan, what they did was at the end of the 12 hours, they would then send out another communication. Oh, it's got to be another 6. Now, you do that, it looks like, first of all, it looks like you failed, that you thought you could do it in 12 and now you need 18. But how about the people who were planning what they should do for the evening if they're not going to have the hot water or other things? So they have changed. They told us they've changed, and I believe they have, that if they know an outage is going to take 18 hours, they're going to tell the residents that it's going to take 18 hours and they should plan on that. But what they weren't going to do was post signs telling people that. They were just going to make phone calls. Now I'm told they're also posting the signs so everybody can get the message. It's really it's a lack of service mentality. It's a lack of treating residents as customers. That's not an easy thing to change. And NYCHA is not ignorant of that or unaware of it, and is making efforts to address that. But that will take time. I think one group that could be helpful in this. There are about 10 or 11,000 employees at NYCHA. About 2,000 of them live in NYCHA. That could be a very potent and powerful force for instilling the service mentality among the NYCHA employees. So it's not that I have an easy solution, but I agree with you that you've identified issues that need and problems that need to be addressed, and these are the kinds of things we can address without asking for more money, but just getting the job done the right way. And if you have other examples or other ideas, and maybe the best thing is as we come out of the pandemic, we'll have a chance to test those ideas. go out. We're ready, willing, and able to listen and to try to make recommendations. There isn't a resident engagement killer, but there doesn't need to be one because it impacts enough of the other pillars and work streams. At least that's my view.
Thank you, Bart, for that response. And thank you again, Mr. Martinez, for your thoughtful presentation. I want to also take this opportunity to thank and acknowledge a couple of the resident leaders in Staten Island who have been true partners to the monitorship. Ms. Doreen Butler, who's a member of the CAC, Ms. Shakina Butler, who is an interim member of the CAC and will resume full-time duties at our next meeting. And we'd also like to thank and acknowledge Dr. Brenda Harris from CCOP. And if any of you are on the line, it's hard for me to see, but raise your hand in the chat if you would like to speak. Now we are formally opening the floor. First up are our Staten Island residents. Everyone will have 2 minutes to speak. And we're opening first to Miss Dana Eldon.
Thank you. I did list that I'm in the Bronx, but good evening. And thank you, Mr. Schwartz, for allowing us to come and speak with you. Basically, I'm coming to this meeting with one question on my mind for a particular group of tenants who do have mold issues. And when they were receiving this testing for lead, I don't know which personnel approached them, but from home and something of NYCHA, it's not even clear to me. But they were told that they will come back and
Healthy homes, healthy homes.
yes, health and homes. There you go. And they were told that they would come back and they would remove the mold and fix whatever damage to the walls in bathrooms, which is where most of those damages were. Just in fact, today I was on the phone with 2 tenants who were told that, and that wasn't done. But of course, the bigger picture is the mold, which we all have. And of course, the other question would be, in adjunction to that, is the lead. Tests were done. As tenant leaders, we were not given any results or given any report to give us an idea of what our status or what our numbers were. So that would be something that I would like to share with my residents at my public meeting next week, if at all possible. But again, the mold issue is something that is rampant in many of our apartments. And I'm really not seeing too much support from NYCHA, but then again, I didn't see any support with the blueprint. They didn't call us and invite us. Even our tenant leaders, our citywide leaders, our CCOP leaders, they didn't invite anybody, as far as I'm concerned, and explain to them what this blueprint was all about. And that's a big problem. I got 90% of our residents who don't know what's going on. And I would like to share some information with them as much as I can. But I think it's NYCHA's responsibility to engage the residents. I mean, if you're talking about 170,000 apartments, there should be 170,000 pieces of mail that have that blueprint in it and an explanation on how they're going to do with tenants, if they have to relocate them, if they have to sign another lease, who's going to pay for all of that. And then take in mind those who are disabled, which I'm one of those people in a wheelchair. I'm also a cancer patient, so I have equipment here. Who's going to take care of that? And what happens with those tenants who can't be moved with all of that equipment? So I think they've moved really fast on this, much too fast for my liking. And I think there should be more resident input and more questions asked about what happens to the resident. He's talking about all this money to fix things. Well, how are we supposed to finagle and through our lifestyles, our daily lifestyles when all of this is going on? It's just too quick, too fast, not enough input from the residents.
Thank you. A couple of thoughts. First, with respect to mold, because I know for a lot of things, the pandemic becomes an excuse. Um, uh, it was difficult to get inside apartments, and that was understandable. And a number of the uh, uh, issues that had to be corrected in apartments, that work was suspended because of the pandemic. Mold was not suspended. So mold work should have continued during the pandemic. So we'd have to look into the individual developments and what was done and not done with on the mold issue. Related to mold, because I want to give you another example. Dennis, yeah, I see you're getting ready, Dennis. Thank you. Um, part of the issue with mold is the lack of ventilation. Um, and the fans which are on, which need to be replaced. And and by the way, the document that I read from earlier seems to imply that they may not be uh, 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 putting in the ventilation fans that they had promised. We're going to have to follow up on that um, because they don't have capital money. Although the ventilation project, as I recall, was the operations, not capital. But we'll have to follow up on that. But I want to take it another step. The ventilation fans are important, but they don't do the job if the ducts aren't clean. And the ducts in uh, the apartments have not been cleaned, many of them for 50 years. Some maybe never have been cleaned,
60 here.
60 years. So there were no contracts let out for cleaning the ducts. So that whatever could have been done with ventilation would have been quite limited because the ducts weren't clean. We raised a fuss about that, as did many other people and elected officials. And NYCHA decided to issue an emergency contract to get ductwork cleaned. And this is where I'm going to need your help, Dennis, and correct me if I'm wrong. But first we were advised that the RFP for ductwork was sent only to minority and women-owned companies. And I support those companies, but when you have an emergency, I would have expected a broader effort. So we asked to see a list of who you send it to, what did you send, and so forth. And by the way, well, so we got the list just the other day. Dennis finally got it, and it's not just women and minority-owned companies, but it's about how many 700 companies, Dennis?
Yeah, I think that's a ballpark, accurate ballpark number.
That uh, there's no reason to believe they have any connection to being able to know how to clean out a duct. There's trucking companies and other things. And out of the 700 companies who received the RFP, how many responded, Dennis?
There were no bids.
Zero. So that's what I'm talking about. Things like that have to be corrected. And adding money is not going to correct whether you can send out the RFP. So we're on top of that, and now we'll have to backtrack and see whether there's a backtracking on the ventilation as well. Now with respect to the blueprint, I'm going to take the residents to task a bit there. There was a public comment period which lasted about 6 weeks. It ended December 28th. But I'll tell you, if you send us comments, we'll accept them. We're not going to treat that as just a drop dead deadline. But there were remarkably few comments from the residents, and many of them were more related to personal issues, not the blueprint itself. So the tenants have an obligation to also to get involved and I know the people on this call are just the people who get involved. So I apologize to you, but there was this effort to get resident involvement. Not enough. I mean, I think there should have been more. But I just want to make sure that everybody understands. Everyone has a responsibility here. Now, and with respect to the not getting reports on the lead, are you talking about the XRF testing that was done with the machine with like a gun? Okay, now maybe Dennis can help us a little bit on that because he also looks at the lead issues, but there also may be privacy issues here. So you might not hear about individual apartments and the like. There may be some raw numbers, like you could be told that 20% of the apartments have 5 instances of lead. You might get that kind of information, but I'm not sure that it's appropriate or even possible to share some of the information. But what can be shared should be. And Dennis, there are some things on the website, aren't there?
Yes, there's actually a lot of good information about lead testing. You have to kind of hunt for it, though. If you go on NYCHA's website and you click on the resident link, there's a column of options on the left side, and one of them is for lead paint inspections. And then when you go to that page, they have up-to-date information. It's updated every 2 weeks for what percentage complete of the 134,000 apartments have been tested. You can actually scroll by development to see whether the development has been tested, what the positive to negative ratio is overall or by development. So it's not an easy thing to find, but once you get there, it is very good information that NYCHA's putting up, and it's refreshed every 2 weeks.
If you're having trouble navigating it, let us know. We'll help you. We'll help you do it. We use that resource a lot, and we're looking for trends and patterns. And to NYCHA's credit, they didn't take the developments which probably didn't have lead and test them first. They went to the developments that there's likely to be lead, and they tested those first because those would be the ones that are most serious to deal with. So what we're seeing now is the more XRF testing that's being done, there seems to be a trend that there's less lead being found. And that's because NYCHA took the difficult ones first and is working its way down.
Thank you, Ms. Eldon, for your very thoughtful question. I now want to remind everyone to please enter in the chat if you would like to speak. It seems like it's actually a relatively shy group, so please just indicate that you want to speak. We have time to hear from you. But if you would like us to read your question, and I see that there are a couple in the chat, we will also do that. Floretta Hudson, please read questions in the chat.
Sure. I'm going to start with those that are on the line that asked me to read their questions out loud. I will start with Anastasia Harris. She's from the Tompkins houses in Brooklyn. And she said she went through a recent situation over the holidays that she did not have a working stove. So her issue was just unresponsiveness to repairs, although she did place the order, but she didn't really get a response that she wanted. Also, she said that residents, their ventilation systems resident ventilation systems are not working properly, and they're not properly maintained, especially if they don't have a window in the apartment. And her question is, why is this situation unattended to? And also, she would like status on lead removal at her development in Brooklyn.
I'll try to deal with each one, respond to each question. I think as far as lead removal is concerned, I make the same offer to you. If you let us know exactly what development you're interested in and you're having any trouble navigating website, we'll be happy to look it up for you. Just send us an email and we'll do that, or call us if email is not easy for you. So we'll do that. As far as the ventilation systems, well, that is a serious issue, as we've just discussed. And I know there are many apartments that don't have vents in the bathrooms. So that makes the problem even more difficult, but that also makes it more important to have the stronger fans on the roof and to clean the ducts. So it's all the same problem. We'll probably have to wait to maybe to the next over the next couple of weeks to find out more about what's happening with the ventilation fans. I know one issue that was not anticipated by anyone, and we believe there are some workarounds that we'll talk to NYCHA about, but they're finding some asbestos in some of the installations. But there should be ways to deal with that. In fact, the Baez expert, I believe, has some suggestions for NYCHA how to deal with that. But again, from the filings made in the court today, I'm not, it sounds like they may be abandoning they don't quite say that, the ventilation fans. We'll just have to find out what's going on there. No working stove. I feel for you. I'm sorry about that. That is the kind of story that unfortunately we hear all too often, and I think it goes back to a lack of accountability and a lack of oversight by the managers who should know when a resident doesn't have a stove or is waiting at home for someone to show up and no one shows up. And then you get a ticket that says resident not there or something like that. That has to be watched. We've introduced a lot of analytics into NYCHA to test things. NYCHA itself is embracing analytics more and more, which is good because it'll be a way to measure. I've mentioned in other meetings, there's a group at NYCHA called PTAD, which creates the dashboards and does a lot of the analytics, and they've been a terrific partner. They've done excellent work, but the dashboards and the information is only as good as the information that goes in, and we've had some problems with that, particularly in the heat, as to how accurate the information is and how reliable. So we're working on that even more now with PTAD, with the heat group, and with operations. So that the hope is that when an order goes in that says no working stove, I've actually asked this question, and I plan to have a meeting. The time hasn't been set yet, but I want to understand who makes the decisions. Who makes a decision whether something is standard, whether something is an emergency, when something is urgent but not an emergency? How does that get figured out so that you can set priorities and take care of the important things first? And I think that's part of training. We have to understand what training is given along those lines to whomever it is who's making those decisions. So there's a lot to look at and to try to build and to make this better. It's not happening overnight, and I wish it were.
Thank you for that thorough question and answer. Eva Trimble from NYCHA's Office of the Chair, did you want to respond?
Thank you, Asha. Yes, I wanted to just clarify a few items that have come up so far in the conversation tonight. First, I wanted to just clarify, obviously, I'm not an attorney and we don't comment on active and ongoing litigation, but I do want to clarify that I think some of the representation of our position was mischaracterized. NYCHA and its development partners are responsible for remediating mold, conducting extensive capital repairs with plumbing, ventilation, roofs, and other repairs, and we are protecting residents on an ongoing basis. The question that is set to be resolved in the Baez matter is a much narrower question than the one that was presented earlier. And so I just want to clarify that our position is different than what was mentioned earlier. So wanted to make sure that was understood. I also do want to comment on the resident that mentioned that there was no outreach regarding the blueprint. And I appreciate that Bart mentioned the public comment period, because that was, the first time ever that NYCHA put out a strategic plan for public comment. But we also did multiple rent inserts. So we did send out regular mail information about both the stabilization plan as part of the blueprint and the transformation plan. So residents should have received both regular mail as well as email notifications about that. We are always looking to improve our outreach efforts, but we have done extensive outreach in all channels of communication, and I wanted to just clarify that for everyone tonight.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you, Eva, but I disagree with you about the Baez litigation. I hope I am wrong, but I understand that it's NYCHA's position that when it hands off the property, it has no responsibility for fixing the mold or whatever the issue is. And that is the issue that is before the judge, I believe. So will have to be decided by the court whether NYCHA has that responsibility, but it is denying that it has that responsibility.
Thank you both, and thank you, Eva, for being here to represent NYCHA. We are now getting some more questions, and I'd like to take a moment to thank and acknowledge some of the elected officials who have also joined us this evening. I see that Councilwoman Barron is here. If you could please introduce yourself and take a moment to say hello.
Thank you. Councilmember Inez Barron, representing the 42nd Councilmatic District in Brooklyn, New York, which is Starrett City, East New York, Brownsville, and parts of East Flatbush. I have a lot of questions, but there are a lot of people, and I want to give opportunity for them to share their thoughts as well. I'm specifically concerned about the RAT or RAD Pact arrangements. We have residents in developments which have mysteriously appeared on the list to be a part of the RAD Pact without any prior notice. I'm talking about developments, as I say, I'm living in Brooklyn, Penn Wortman, Belmont, Sutter, Florentino. Mysteriously, miraculously, they were added without any prior notice to either myself or the Assembly member, Charles Barron, or notice even to the residents that they were now being included in this arrangement. They have vociferously said they do not want to be included. So my first question is there a threshold that must be met for development to be forced into this program?
Councilwoman Barron, let me first say that I grew up at East 94th Street and Linden Boulevard.
Okay.
That's
my district.
I was a member of the Brownsville Boys Club.
Okay.
RAD and PACT is not a part of what and how those decisions are made. They're not part of the HUD agreement, and it's not something I'm involved in. And I really don't want to put Eva or anyone on the spot. Be happy to ask that question for you and try to find out and get an answer. I have asked a similar question as to whether there's ever been a consideration to putting it up to a vote. Let people in the development decide whether they want to go RAD or PACT. And I understand that that may be what is done for similar programs in other cities. So it's not as outlandish an idea as it may sound. But And in getting the answer to that question, another thing I was told, which does make sense to me, is that they try to balance the packages. Uh, uh, so, but that doesn't mean that you should be forcing people who don't want it. I'm just telling you what I've been told.
Part of the reasons that people are looking at rejecting going into that is because regardless of what's being said at the moment, you must right size. And if that means downsize, you must downsize. So what's being said at these meetings, oh, we're not going to force people, you can, but what's not being told, and it's a part of, I think, NYCHA's history of not telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, either in reports to the feds or in reports to the council as to what they've done to address the situation of lead or mold or pests. They have not been truthful. So that's the history that has been documented that we're looking at. They've not been effective in even utilizing what resources the state or the feds have given them. They've not been resourceful enough to use that money effectively. So people need to know that they're going to be moving perhaps into a Section 8, and that's going to be a challenge for some people. They must downsize. They must downsize. And there are, in fact, other requirements in terms of rights of succession. There are lots of details that are written plainly, but are being glossed over by NYCHA and not being fully represented. But the other question is, people say, well, what are you going to do if you don't go into the RAD impact? There's now issues being considered at the state level for what they're calling community land trust arrangements. What we are saying, and what some council members are working on, is making a resident arrangement where the residents will have the rights of ownership, of management, of hiring, the same way that the state gives money to other developers and allows them to get loans and to do the work based on what has to be done. That can be applied to a resident body that is established to address the issue. It's not far-fetched. It's not something that's impossible. So as people say, well, what would you do if you don't go into the RAD Pact arrangement? We would allow tenants to be trained, to be able to develop their skills, to be able to have someone monitoring them and guiding them so that they understand what their responsibilities are, and have them have a part of that ownership, have them a part of that decision-making body, not just doing outreach and asking people what they want and then turning around and doing what you want to do regardless of what the tenants and the residents have said they want to do. So those are, I won't press you further about the RAD and PAC, except to say that the residents in those developments here have said they don't want to be involved in that. They don't want to be restricted to that. They don't want to just have cosmetic bathrooms and kitchens without having the infrastructure of replacing the boiler system so that it will be functional, and replacing the pipes in the building so that they will not burst with this new pressure. So they don't want to be a part of that. And we stand with them to say we need to look at how the residents can be empowered and authorized to operate, manage, own their own developments where they are. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Council Member, for your leadership and also for joining us this evening. We appreciate you being here. And you speak about a very important issue that I know it's on a number of minds and hearts of residents, the PACT and RAD issue. Unfortunately, though, it is outside of the HUD agreement and the monitor's focus, so we won't be talking about it this evening, but thank you, though, for bringing up those important issues.
Thank you.
I do now want to turn to one of our Staten Island resident. So you are thereby on our VIP list. Mrs. Brown, will you please unmute yourself?
Good evening. I'm not from Staten Island.
Well,
I'm from
we'll be happy
Manhattan.
to take your question.
My
It's okay,
concern
you're still a VIP to us. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. I want to thank Council Member Barron because I support all of her comments. The problem we're having, and we will continue to have, is NYCHA lacks accountability and they are not transparent. They continue to lie to the residents. But more importantly, they do not engage the residents. As a NYCHA RAB member, they presented the blueprint to us last year and this year. And my comments were, I don't see where they're engaging the resident. They were focused on getting Section 8 dollars to go forward with other things. But there was no mention or indication on how you're going to engage the resident, to empower the resident. Unfortunately, with the RAB, many of the leaders do not share the information that is discussed at RAB meetings. The CCOP will meet with NYCHA. They may or may not share this information with other RAB members. Decisions are constantly being made without the input of resident leaders at the various developments. It's a problem. And as far as relocating residents from public housing into RAD and PAC, that's a huge problem. And I always caution everyone to make sure your MOU protects your specific development before you go forward. Now, I strongly recommend that the monitor look at home ownership for public housing residents. There is a program in place, and most residents are unaware of the home ownership opportunity. I'm sorry?
I think that was just some background noise.
Oh, okay. Most of the residents are not aware of the home ownership policy program. And it's critical that they get this information so that they can have an opportunity to create a legacy for their children and to move out of public housing. Public housing was set up for 7 or 8 years, and you move up and move out so the next group can come in. It's not generational. You'll hear residents over and over again proudly stand up and say, I've resided here for 54 years, 30 years, my grandmother. That's not what public housing is all about. And another problem for the public housing resident is the Section 3 program. With the final rule, it does not favor the resident. That final rule needs to be scrapped and thrown out. And the residents aren't being told about the final rule, how it impacts them. They're not really being trained. And that's a real problem. That's a real problem. Now, as far as the various departments there at NYCHA, I think the hardest working department is the PTAT department. They're doing their best. They really get out information. The analytics are almost on point, and I agree with you, Mr. Schwartz. You know, there are some areas, but it's the information that they get, so that's what they put out. And so we really seriously need to look at NYCHA taking the monitor seriously, the monitor's office seriously, because they continue to repeat the same problems with lead, with mold. I recommended to them 5 years ago, IPE, Integrated Pest Management, and for them to look at the Boston Housing Authority program. And they said they were going to implement it. I talked to many of the residents and they don't know what I'm talking about. So it's a matter of getting information to the residents, it's a matter of empowering the residents. and supporting them. What they're trying to do is move as many public housing residents into RAD or PAC environment. And there are many residents in public housing who have challenges, mental challenges, and they would not survive under a RAD or PAC program. These residents need to be protected. The seniors need to be protected. NYCHA needs to do a better job. And every time I turn around, there's always a new person at NYCHA at the top. And part of the Section 3 program, when they have a position that's open, they're supposed to send out notices to everybody. And also, too, there are 235,000 Section 8 residents under NYCHA's portfolio. And of course, they're orphans. Nobody talks about the Section 8 program. It's always public housing, but they're using Section 8 dollars, administrative dollars, to run most of the programs. So I feel, I'm of the opinion that NYCHA needs to go into receivership. I know it's a bad word, but receivership is the answer. Boston Housing Authority went into receivership and it turned it around, and they're one of the better public housing authorities in the nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Brown. We appreciate your thoughtful comments. Bart, would you like to respond?
Well, unfortunately, and I don't like being in this position, it's not something that, for the most part, that is in the jurisdiction of the monitor. It's the work that we do is more focused, but I mean, I think the Washington Heights is an example where we're not ignoring what may be issues, where mold is not being remediated properly. But there is, I mean, look, there's a connection between RAD, PACT, and the blueprint, because as I understand it, for the blueprint to work, you've got to get down to about 110,000 apartments. And the only way you're going to get down to 110,000 apartments is to go RAD and PACT. So there is an interconnection there, but I really have very little jurisdiction or authority to do things. Where we can, will be helpful. You mentioned the home ownership opportunity that really, or the councilwoman mentioned that, and the community land trust. They sound like interesting ideas, but it's not something that I really can be involved in. It's not my authority. Frankly, we don't have the budget to do it. Our budget is squeezed as it is. The pandemic has really squeezed the city, and that squeezed our budget. NYCHA doesn't pay for us. The city pays for us. And so they are really squeezing our budget, and we're doing the best we can with what we're getting.
Thank you again, Mrs. Brown. Thank you, Bart. Ms. Floretta Hudson, will you please address the question in the chat from Ms. Vanessa Collins?
Yes. So Vanessa she's a resident of Staten Island. She said she's curious to know, what is the monitor doing to support the tenants? She's also a new tenant to South Beach Houses. And she said, when I moved into the apartment, it was neat and in order, but months later, the floors shifted and the borders are now tearing off. The plastering there's a need for repair there, and the painting is not as good. So being in the apartment, she says it's falling apart, and she was told it's not an emergency. So she took pictures and she's waiting for tickets to be closed, but nothing yet.
Well, I think you've hit on something which is a broad problem. It's not just your apartment, and I think NYCHA has taken I hope a step in the right direction by creating a head of procurement and hiring somebody we've heard good things about. Because I believe what you're talking about is is primarily a procurement problem at NYCHA, and that is that the procurement is done so poorly, the RFPs are done so poorly, the inspections and accountability are so ignored that NYCHA attracts the worst vendors. And on top of that, NYCHA is a slow pay. And so the best vendors do not want to work for NYCHA. So the way to attack the problem you're talking about, or one of the ways to attack it, is to improve procurement and to improve the system for paying vendors. And I know it may sound strange for me to be saying pay faster, but pay faster and you'll get quality work. You'll get better work. It's an unfortunate reality of the world that when you're dealing not based on quality, but based on other issues, that's when corruption also enters the system. So I really think what you're talking about is a basic change that's needed in the way vendors are chosen, in the way vendors are managed, and in the way vendors are paid. And then you will get quality work done. Your examples are unfortunately not unusual. We see examples where vendors take the handles that you put in a bathroom for a disabled or an elderly person. They are screwed into the drywall, and that's even more dangerous than not having a handle, a bar for somebody to hold on to. And that's because of the quality of the vendors, and they get away with it. But I really do think that the new person in procurement, and is Joe Jaffe on? I thought I saw Joe before. Joe must have known I was going to call upon him. He's gone. But Joe,
Joe is here. He's here.
Joe, I know you've been working on procurement. Are there any other issues? Is there any other issues that I missed or something you'd want to add? Because it is, and by the way, that's a perfect example. There is no pillar for procurement, but procurement cuts across everything, almost everything that you do. So you can't ignore procurement and say you're going to try to improve other things. So we're paying attention to procurement, and it's just very frustrating. The reason that the vendors don't get paid, by the way, is because Maximo doesn't talk to Oracle. I think I've got it right. Or Oracle doesn't talk to Maximo. But the point is, two computers don't talk to each other, and that delays the payment process and creates opportunities for wrongdoing because it's so much of it is manual and done by individuals.
The other point,
the capital side, I have a lot of problems with the capital side, but the capital side has fixed their computer problem and they're paying their people in 29 days. On the operation side, you have to wait months. So you're not detracting the best people, but they're still charging a lot because they're making up for not getting paid on time. Joe, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, the issues you raised are some of the issues, and what's happened is NYCHA is now pointing its attention at trying to redo procurement, both on the capital side, but also on the operations side, especially with regard to the work that gets done at the developments, where so much of the work gets farmed out to third-party contractors. And the idea of having better contracts in place, having better background checks done on people, having an idea of who should be doing what work and who delivers the best prices are all things now that the new procurement officer that they have is starting to put into effect. Now, I don't want to say this is going to happen in a week or a month. It'll probably take a year and a half to put that type of program together. But to your point, the overall result will be better quality contractors and vendors, better products that are actually delivered on time to the standards they're supposed to be. When that gets together with the quality assurance that they're trying to put on top of it, the people in the developments are going to see a marked difference.
Yeah. If NYCHA paid on time, it wouldn't take a year and a half to get good vendors to want contracts.
Well, to Bart, to your point, the last contract, which Dennis can talk more about, there were practically no bidders.
Not practically. There were zero bidders. They did rebid it, but there were no bidders. But I think there were other issues there as to whether they sent it out to the right group of vendors. And again, the new leader at procurement is experienced, and we hear good things about him. His first name is Sergio, right? I forget his
Yes,
last.
and he's been procurement officer for the state of New York. He was procurement officer out west. He's got a long history in education, and he's a CPA. He's a lawyer. He's got an engineering degree.
Yeah.
So he's somebody who can really know what standards are supposed to be and what you put into a contract to get the right people.
And Bart, if I may, I just want to jump in here as well and just say that in addition to the technology and system issues, there are more broader issues as far as our payment delays. And one of the initiatives in the transformation plan is borough admin teams that will actually place some of the central office staff in the boroughs to help facilitate some of these issues, including payment of our vendors. So really encourage all the residents on the line tonight to take a look at the transformation plan, which is still on our website, and read through some of these initiatives that we're proposing to actually solve some of these problems.
Thanks, Eva.
Thank you. And we have another representative from an elected official office. Will you please unmute yourself and introduce yourself, Ian?
Hi, can you all see me? Hi, my name is Ian Yonda, and I'm here to represent Assemblyman Michael Tanusis from the 64th Assembly District, representing the Eastern Shore of Staten Island and parts of Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. I'm really just here to introduce myself. And this is my first time attending a NYCHA meeting. Thank you all for having me. Anytime you guys would like to reach out for any assistance from our team and the assemblyman, you could reach out. If anyone would like my email, I could give that in the chat for anyone who would need it, because I'd be glad to give that out, just to be in contact and be able to be helpful wherever I can be.
Thank you. We'd appreciate it if you did put your email in the chat. Thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Please put your contact information in the chat. Mrs. Brown, I just wanted to turn back to you for a moment. Our lead investigator, Fred Baldino, is going to follow up with you, if that's okay, directly to learn more about your comments.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Asha, because what many of you may not know is that as part of the monitoring team, we have a group, mostly former NYPD, but some other law enforcement as well. And we have them on the team, not because of the direct law enforcement background, but because they are good with people, and they see things and they ask the right questions, and they know how to report the information back so it's accurate. And it is Fred Baldino leads that group. They spend a lot of time with residents. Unfortunately, 4 have come down with COVID as a result of all the time that they've spent. 2 early on in the pandemic, both have recovered, although 1 had a real battle, and 2 just recently. But we may pull them back a little bit until the vaccine is better distributed. But they do a terrific job. They talk to people. The Washington Heights information was followed up because Fred and his people wanted to follow up. The information was kind of out there for others to see, but nobody was doing anything about it. And Fred did do something about it and developed the information that then, as I said, was shared with NYCHA. HUD and the Southern District of New York, and then jointly investigated with NYCHA, primarily by, Fred, if I'm correct, primarily by the compliance department that had been set up. Is that right? Of the
Yes,
three
that's,
departments,
that's correct. Yep.
the compliance department.
Mhm.
And those three departments um, uh, are doing a very good job. They could always, everybody could use more resources. They could use more people, but they are getting real value out of the people who are there. Joe Jaffe and Mary Stutzman, is somewhere on the call. There's Mary, at least on my screen. Joe and Mary led the sort of consulting side of helping NYCHA build those three departments, decide what their charters should look like, how they should operate, give them a sense of what they should handle and what each one should handle and how they should do it. And they've really done a good job. They're very serious about their work. They're very critical about what they see. If they think something is wrong, they say so, and they record it. And they report it. So it's a different kind. You talk about cultural change. Departments like that can contribute to a change in culture where what they're demanding is quality work. What they want to see is a job well done. The employees want to do a good job. I don't want this to become an employee bashing exercise, and certainly I have no intent to do that. The employees work hard. They need to get the tools. They need to get the training. They need to get the oversight, and then you'll see more and more results.
Thank you. And next, I would like to turn to a caller on the phone. Mrs. Russell, please, if you could please *6 to unmute yourself. From Richmond Terrace Houses on the phone. Please *6 to unmute yourself and you can proceed.
I'm happy to express her question. I think she's put it in the chat. And if we can get her on, then we'll do so. But her question, is that okay? Great. Her question is, why is it that Richmond Terrace Housing doesn't have a manager? And why is there a hold on renting and transferring apartments within a facility at Richmond Terrace Housing? She also would like to know why, as residents, they're forced to live in such filthy conditions. The buildings are filthy, and the only time anyone is truly concerned about facility cleanliness is when someone from the state is coming for an inspection. She's wondering why they're forced to live like that.
Yeah, these questions are for Richmond Terrace Houses, but I think they apply to a lot of developments because they seem to be systemic issues. Bart, would you like to respond, please? And maybe so.
Yeah, it's very difficult to respond because it really is all the things we've been talking about in terms of making improvements in the way services are delivered, and that is a goal of the organizational plan or the transformational plan, whatever you want to call it. The name is not as important as the goals, and those are the goals of those plans to change the way NYCHA has been organized. The first step the first step, unfortunately, was a misstep. But sometimes you have missteps. That was the AWS, which I think everyone knows didn't work and has to be better planned and better implemented. But what's behind AWS is to provide more service over a longer period during the day. So in the morning when you leave, things are clean during the day, and in the evening when you come home from work, things are still clean. So that is the goal of all these plans, and it's we have to do it step by step. That's why aspects of the transformation plan are being put in place, such as the neighborhood model. Um, uh, while the plan isn't approved, it doesn't mean that NICE is supposed to stand still. They've, I mean, that would be like saying you have to improve a year and a half from now and do it overnight, but you can't improve during the 18 months it takes to get there. Obviously, that's not the real world. They have to be trying things, testing things, trying to improve all the time. We've recommended that a pest waste management department be set up. NYCHA has done that. They have not staffed it and budgeted it the way it needs to be, but it's the first time when two such obvious things which go together, waste and pests, it's the first time they'll be managed together. So these things are the changes will take place. I can't tell you why your development in particular is having such problems, but maybe by raising it tonight, it will help you get an answer, or someone from NYCHA will take a look.
Thank you again for raising your question. Ms. Hudson, will you please call on the next caller or read the next question if we have any others pending?
Or so we have another comment from Nicole Rochelle. She's a resident of Staten Island. She says there is an issue with smoking in the halls and stealing packages. She said the main front door is constantly broken and there are major security issues. What is being done to ensure tenants feel secure and safe in their buildings?
Yeah, that's really an interesting question. The HUD agreement is relatively silent about security. And I believe that's because when the agreement was made, the city was a lot safer. And it wasn't an issue on top of mind for everyone. Since the agreement, things are not so great, and things are not as safe as they were. I've taken the position that security is a reason in part why AWS didn't work, because workers were afraid to go out at night because it wasn't safe. It's why hundreds, if not millions, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars are spent on repairs, which could be avoided if damage was not done by others. It's why homeless people make their homes and their bathrooms in lobbies and hallways. It's why people get hurt. So security is something that is very important. And I'm glad that that after we raised it, the original transformation plan did not have what I'll call a chapter or a section on security, and that has since been added as a result of things worsening and bringing attention to that issue. The safety and security group at NYCHA is really quite small. Some of the facilities where there are cameras, they're not really being taken advantage of because they only go to the cameras after there's an event, after there's a crime, rather than using it to try to prevent crime. So there's a lot of work to be done there. NYCHA is the only place in the city where the NYPD does vertical patrols, not just horizontal patrols. And I know that with a lot of the gangs that exist, people want more. In many cases, want more police protection, not less. So this is something that has to be worked on by NYCHA, by the NYPD, with the help of the residents. Everybody's got to take a share in this to try to make things safer. But it's not just the NYCHA problem, unfortunately. It's become a much bigger problem for the city as a whole. That's not a reason not to try your best and to do our best to improve things. But it's more of a challenge because there are more demands on the resources.
Great.
You know, I'll just add one thing. I think I told this story at one of the other meetings, but we went around with CCOP. Actually, Danny Barber took us on a tour and showed us in the development where he is that thick copper wire was being cut out of the ground and stolen, which meant that the temporary boilers and the temporary electricity, all of that was being cut off by someone or ones who were stealing the copper wire. This is while the machine is running. So you got to be pretty desperate to be cutting through that while the machine is running. And nobody knew who could catch this person. Well, one of the people, a woman detective in Fred Baldino's group, she realized that there were certain cameras around which maybe would be helpful. And so she sat down and she went through the cameras, identified the person who was arrested, and that problem was eradicated. So it's you got to be not a word I like, but you got to be proactive in these things. You've got to be aggressive to try to solve these problems.
It's true. But I know security issues really are top of mind for a lot of residents right now. And you shouldn't have to live in fear. Ms. Hudson, will you please voice Mr. Tyrone Balls's comment?
Yes, thank you, Asha. So Tyrone Bald, he's from the St. Nicholas Houses in Manhattan, and he is a tenant association president. And he says the repairs are still lagging in time from call to repair. We still have problems with heat and hot water. And the mold is being checked, but no updates on the removal process. Please advise.
Well, again, I think a lot of what we've discussed addresses that. But we could take a look at work orders. We've become pretty good at understanding, analyzing, and looking for patterns or lack of work in work orders. Maybe Bob Costello, who's I see is on. Bob, maybe you could in the next few days start looking at some things there and see what you may find. So it was mold. What were give me the other things that were concerned? It was mold.
So the repairs, the lag in repairs, heat and hot water, and mold updates.
Yeah, on heat and hot water, the repairs, once they start, take a certain amount of time to be completed. Now that assumes that the right person is there, that the equipment is there, that the tools are there, the replacement parts are there. But once that happens, it's very difficult to make the repairs faster. So our focus is on the response time. How quickly do you show up? Do you show up with the equipment ready to go? Have you notified the other city agencies that have to be done? So the way we're trying to focus on that is to cut the response time where we can have an influence. And it's not been easy. And we think that some of the information that we've been getting is not accurate. And we have to go back. We're not accepting NYCHA's analytics. We're doing our own analytics on when it comes to heat and response time. This may seem very obvious to you, but if you have, I guess it's Bronx and Queens, if I've got this right, that have skilled workers centers and have equipment and storerooms and tools and spare parts. And not surprisingly, those two boroughs had the quickest response time for a heat outage. If we're hoping NYCHA will replicate that in the other boroughs. And my instincts tell me that the neighborhood model would help advance that happening. But right now, NYCHA has told us they won't add it to the other three boroughs. They're not going to do that until after the heating season. So we have those two boroughs. At least they had their time is improved, and we think we can find other ways to improve the response time. That's where I think we can really have an impact.
Bart, and I know from St. Nicholas Houses, because we were part of a joint inspection with the heat department and environmental health and safety, that they also have distribution issues there in terms of the interior piping, the risers and things. So that's also a circumstance that makes heating, certainly even heating, difficult across all the buildings.
And Dan, that also implicates the standard procedures, doesn't it? When you get a complaint that an apartment doesn't have heat, you don't just look at that apartment. You try to figure out, is that part of a larger outage? Is the boiler out, but the building is still warm enough because you're there so quickly? There are things you should be doing to try to identify whether an outage exists. And that's part of what we're trying to influence as well, to make that.
Yeah, and then respond as quickly as possible.
Right, exactly.
With the repair teams.
Thank you. And Mr. Ball, we're also going to have our team member, Mr. Baldino, Fred Baldino, will follow up with you directly as well. Thank you so much for bringing your comment to us. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Again, of course, you're here because you care, and we really appreciate your thoughtful questions and responses. And we remind you that this isn't the only opportunity to reach out to us. Please keep in touch. You can always stay up to date at the NYCHAmonitor.com website, or email us at monitor@nychamonitor.com, or call us. We have a toll-free number that at 844-309-6080. And before I close out, I want to ask Ms. Hudson, please, to voice the concern from Mr. Martinez, a follow-up issue.
Yes, he had a follow-up question. He says that is Ms. Trimble's reference to NYCHA's transformation plan in reference to the blueprint for change?
Could I ask which comment? Or do you get the question, Eva?
I'll just clarify that the blueprint for change is a overarching strategy that includes multiple plans. The first is the stabilization plan, which is the plan to raise capital funding and request a public housing preservation trust through state legislation that will enable us to both raise and spend significant capital funding to comprehensively rehab NYCHA apartments. The second strategy underneath the blueprint for change is the transformation plan, which is involving the organizational change that we need to do, the management, accountability, all of the things that have been talked about today. The transformation plan addresses our plans to change our management and deliver better quality services to our residents. So those together are part of the blueprint for change.
Thanks for that clarification, and thank you for that follow-up question, Mr. Martinez. One of the things I wanted to let you all know is that we have two types of meetings. Our community meetings, where we go to every borough and we just have pretty much an open mic session where we try to hear from as many residents as possible. listen to your concerns, answer your questions, and invite you to follow up with us. So we will continue this cycle of getting to every single borough again this year. So we will be in Brooklyn on March 16th, virtual. It's unfortunate. I doubt we'll be ready for in-person by March 16th, but hopefully we'll be back in person sometime soon. May 11th, we'll be in Manhattan, July 13th, Queens, September 14th, the Bronx, and then we'll start the cycle over again. But even when we're not in your specific borough, you're always invited to join us. And then we also have what we call CAC meetings, where we have a small group of stakeholders from various organizations. We have Agnes Mack from DYCD and DIFTA represented. We have the mayor's office represented. We have from each borough represented. We have NYCHA represented. We have elected officials at the table. So it's a round table where we just each focus on different issues and educating each other, et cetera. And for the TAPs, as Mr. Hall can tell you, it's often just a lot of work. You know, it's a volunteer position. You just have to be willing to roll up your sleeves and give some thoughtful advice to some of these meaty issues that we face and be a representative for us to your borough. So thank you all, CAC members who joined us tonight. For those at TAPs and other boroughs that might be interested in rolling up your sleeves and working with us with the CAC, please express your interest. Either formally or informally, we're happy to talk to you and get your ideas and learn from you. So we really want to hear from you. If you want to get more involved, let us know. And thank you again for participating and your attendance. And we know that this can be frustrating in a lot of ways. We appreciate you working with us. And now I'll turn it over to Bart Schwartz to close us out, please.
I would also add that at the CAC, we have the fire department and NYPD are also permanent members. And we'll rotate resident members. It's been an excellent working group, which not just a group commenting on things, but taking on projects to help that are system-wide ideas and projects. I just wanted to say thank you for everyone who attended and participated, and to echo what Asha said about contacting us. Please feel free to do that. It's the way we learn about things. It's the way it helps us understand, and we try to be as responsive as we can to individual complaints as well as to those that are more system-wide. So always feel free to call us. And again, thank you for participating. And let's hope that everyone who was involved in that fire comes out well. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, there's one more announcement I wanted to make. We've been working closely with our CAC members from FDNY, and one of the things that they're doing as an initiative from the CAC is really helping to have training, virtual training sessions at developments or borough-wide. So for our many TAPs, if you're interested in having the fire department do a virtual training, that's something that's available. You could contact them directly. They have a lot of training material on their FDNY website, or contact us and we can get you connected with the fire department trainers. So I just want to leave with that announcement. And then the other thing about the CAC meetings, those are, it's a different setup. So sometimes it's a little bit confusing. We don't have open comment period. We just have CAC members talking about their work areas and presenting. And then the comments are only in the chat in the online stream feature. But then the open period is when we do the community meetings the next month. So join us though, please, for the CAC meeting and for our next community meeting. And please tell your residents and other TAPs to join us. Thank you again. And thank you, Bart.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Stay safe.
Yes.